All right, 1.3, linear equations in two variables. Okay, slope-intercept form of an equation is y equals mx plus b, where m is your slope and b is your y-intercept. Okay, and your y-intercept, which is b, is 0, comma, whatever that b is. Okay, remember, slope is rise over run. Okay, so sketch the graph. Okay, so as we look at A, it's already in y equals mx plus b form. So it's nice because you can say your slope is a fraction, so 2 over 1, and my y-intercept is 1, okay, which is 0, comma 1. Okay, so I'm always going to graph the y-intercept first. So at 0, 1, okay, so 0, 1. And then from that, I'm going to use my slope, which is rise over run. Since my rise is positive, I'm going to go up 2, and my run is positive 1, so I'm going to go to the right one. I'm going to go up 2, so 1, 2, right 1, up 2, right 1. I'm going to draw my line connecting those and making arrows at the ends to show that it goes on and on forever. Okay. All right, looking at C here, we have x plus y equals 2. We are not in slope-intercept form. So to solve into slope-intercept form, we're going to subtract the x. And we're just going to get y equals negative x plus 2. So my slope in this case is negative 1 over positive 1. And my y-intercept is 0, comma 2. So I'm going to graph the point 0, 2, which is just up 2. Then from there, I'm going to use my slope. Now my rise is negative, so I'm going to go down 1. And my run is positive, so I'm going to go to the right. So down 1, right 1, down 1, right 1. So then I'm going to draw my line with arrows on the end. Okay. All right, looking at B, y equals 2. Okay. We're in y equals, which is great. So we would y equals mx plus b, but we don't have an x. So my slope, since we don't have an x, would be 0. And you can always put it as 0 over 1. And then my y-intercept would be 0, comma 2. Okay. So now 0 over 2, I'd be up 2. Now I'm going to rise 0, but I'm going to run 1. So if you notice, we're actually forming a horizontal line. So if you notice, when there's no x, we are parallel to the x-axis. Okay. So as you look at D here, you notice x is negative 1. We have no y-intercept here, but we do have an x-intercept. So my x-intercept is actually negative 1, comma 0. Now we have no y, so we have to be parallel to the y-axis. So we're going to be parallel to the y-axis. So we have a vertical line here. Now, if you notice this, we have no y, okay? So we actually have no slope also, or an undefined slope, okay? All right, so that's graphing. If you have questions with graphing, let me know. All right, finding the slope of a line, okay? We have the formula of y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, okay? So to find slope, it's always the change in y over the change in x. Okay, so looking at A here, remember, an ordered pair is always x, comma, y. So it doesn't matter which one's your y1s, which one's your y2s, it doesn't matter. So as I find my slope here, okay, my y2 I'm going to use as a 1, so 1 minus 0 over, now since I chose 1 for my y2, that 3 has to be my x2 minus a negative 2. And I always put parentheses around my negatives so you don't lose them, okay? So 1 minus 0 is 1. Change, so 3 plus 2 is 5. So my slope is 1 over 5. Okay. All right, B, x, y. So we'll make these ones my 2's. Okay, so my slope. So 2 minus 2 over x2 is 2 minus a negative 1. So 2 minus 2 is 0. Change. 2 plus 1 is 3. And 0 over 3 is always 0. So my slope of this one is 0. So that means we would have a horizontal line. Okay. Okay. Now, if 0 was in my denominator, you would have that vertical, and you can't have 0 in the denominator, so that would be an undefined slope. Okay. All right, point slope form. Okay, point slope form is y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1, okay? Where x1 and y1 is a point, and your m is your slope. So that's what you always plug into. Then once you get into point slope form, you can solve it into slope intercept or any other form you want, okay? So let's look at an example. Find the slope intercept form of an equation that has the point, the slope of 3, and passes through the point 1, -2. So since we have a point and a slope, I'm going to plug it into point slope form. So y minus my y coordinate, which is -2, equals my m, which is my 3, times x minus my x1, which is 1. And minus a negative is positive, okay? Now, we're not in slope-intercept form. Slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. But we can go ahead and solve for y. So your first step to solve would be distribute. So y plus 2 would equal 3x minus 3. And then subtract the 2 over. So I get y equals 3x minus 5. Now we're in slope-intercept form. Now we're going to keep using point slope, but we're going to now include it with parallel and perpendicular lines. Okay, so parallel and perpendicular. So two distinct non-vertical lines are parallel if and only if their slopes are the same. So if a slope of a line is 2, its parallel slope will also be 2. Okay. If two non-vertical lines are perpendicular, if and only if their slopes are negative reciprocals. And the reciprocal, remember, is the flip of the fraction, okay? So if one slope is, let's say, 1/2, its perpendicular slope, perpendicular is an upside down T, so the negative of 1/2 would be negative, and the reciprocal would be 2/1, or just -2. Okay, so negative reciprocal. Okay, so it's the opposite and the flip of the fraction. Okay, all right, example 4. Find the slope-intercept form of the equation of the lines that pass through the point. So we have a point of 2, -1 that is parallel and perpendicular to the line of 2x minus 3y equals 5. Well, to be parallel and perpendicular, we need to know something about the slope, okay? So we need to find the slope of this line, okay? And to be able to find the slope of that line, you have to put it in slope-intercept form. So let's solve for y. So I'm going to subtract the 2x over. So I get -3y equals -2x plus 5. Divide by -3. So I get y equals 2/3 x minus 5/3. Okay, so this is that line. So the slope of this line would be 2/3. Okay, so now parallel. So let's do part A. To be parallel, we have to have the same slope. So we know its parallel slope would also be 2/3. Okay, so now we have a point and we have our slope. Let's plug it into point slope form. So y minus my y1, which is -1, equals my slope, which is the same, times x minus my x1, which is 2. Now it says slope intercept form. This is point slope, so we need to keep going. So y plus 1, we're going to distribute. So 2/3 times x is 2/3 x. And then 2/3 times a -2 would be -4/3. Okay. Now solving for y, I'm going to add this, subtract this 1 to the other side. So I get y equals 2/3 x. Now to be able to subtract, we need common denominator. So 1 is the same thing as 3 over 3. So -4/3 minus 3/3 would be -7/3. And now here we have this line in slope-intercept form that is perpendicular to this line. Okay. All right, next one. Perpendicular. Okay, so perpendicular. Sorry. So we're going to do the same idea. The only difference is parallel slope was the same. Our perpendicular slope, since this is a positive, it has to be a negative. And the reciprocal of 2/3 would be 3 over 2. So we're using this slope now. Okay. Now we're still going through the same point. So y minus my y coordinate, which is -1, equals my perpendicular slope, which is this -3 over 2, times x minus my x coordinate, which is 2. Now we need to get this into slope-intercept form, so let's go ahead and work from there. Okay. So we have y plus 1 equals -3 over 2 times x, and then a negative times a negative is a positive, and 3/2 times 2 would just be 3. Subtract my 1, so I get y equals -3 over 2x plus 2. So now here is our perpendicular line, and we know it's perpendicular to this one because our slopes are opposite or negative reciprocals of each other. Okay. All right, example 5. The maximum recommended slope of a wheelchair ramp is 1/12. A business installs a wheelchair ramp that rises, so it's rising 22 inches over a horizontal length of 24, that should say feet, sorry, 24 feet. Okay. Is the stamp steeper than what is recommended? Okay. So if we know our recommended ramp is 1/12, that's approximately 0.083. Okay. So we cannot go above that. And if we do, it is not at its recommended maximum recommended slope. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at the slope of this. And remember, slope is our rise over our run. So we know our ramp rises 22 inches. So we know our numerator is going to be 22 inches. My run is that horizontal length, which is 24 feet. Okay. Now, to be able to simplify this, we need to have the same units. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at our inches. Okay, so 22 inches over 24 feet, there are 12 inches in 1 foot. So we're going to take 24 and times it by 12, which we get 288 inches. Okay. So now, since they're in the same units, we can simplify, and we would get 11 over 144, which is approximately 0.076. So if you look at our wheelchair ramp to what is recommended, the maximum recommended, since we are below that, this ramp is okay. All right. All right. Example 6. A kitchen appliance manufacturing company determines the total cost C in dollars of producing X units of a blender is given by C equals 25X plus 3,500. Interpret the y-intercept and the slope of the line. Okay, so X is representing the number that we are producing, the units we're producing. Okay, and my C is my total cost, my Y is my total cost. Okay, remember our y-intercept we know is this 3,500. Right? So my y-intercept is 3,500. Okay? And we know a y-intercept is always the coordinate of 0, comma, b, which is this 3,500, right? So my x is 0, and my y is my total cost. So what does this actually represent? So we know my cost is $3,500 when we produce X units, which in this case are 0 units. Okay. So to start this company, pretty much it cost us $3,500 automatically before we even produce any units of a blender. Okay. My slope, we know, is the y, is my m, which is next to the x, so 25 over 1. So we know it's always the change in y over the change in x. Okay, and my y again is my cost over the number of units, right? So we know for every 1 unit, it's going to cost us $25. So to produce 1 unit, it will cost $25. Okay? All right, example 7. A college person purchased exercise equipment worth $12,000 for a new campus fitness center. Okay? The equipment has a useful life of 8 years. The salvage value at the end of the 8 years is $2,000. Write a linear equation that describes the book value of the equipment. Okay, so let's set these up as ordered pairs. So if we start and we purchase something for $12,000, we know we've used it 0 amount of time, and it's going to cost us $12,000, right? So the 0 represents my year, and this is my cost. Okay, it is 8 years is our useful life, and at the end of 8 years, we're only going to get $2,000 back. Okay, so my year is after 8 years, it is $2,000. Okay, so now we have 2 coordinates here. So let's go ahead and find our slope. So my slope will be my cost over my years. So my cost would be 12,000 minus 2,000 over 0 minus 8. So we're going to get 10,000 over negative 8, which you know my slope is a negative 1,250. So every year we're losing $1,250, okay, because it's negative. Now, since my year is 0, don't I have my y-intercept? Yeah, because it's going to cost us $12,000 without even using it, okay? So we have our slope, we have our y-intercept, so write our equation. So y equals negative 1,250x plus 12,000. So what this is, every year I use it, I'm going to lose 1,250 for that. Okay. And then example 8. The sales for Nike was approximately $25.3 billion in 2013 and $27.8 billion in 2014. Using only this information, write a linear equation that gives the sales in terms of year. Then predict the sales in 2017. Okay. So now, to write our linear equation, okay, we're looking at our years here. Okay, so 2013, I'm just going to label it as year 3. Okay, so we're going to start with 3, thinking that 2010 would be our 0. Okay. In 2013, they sold 25.3 billion, and in 2014, we'll use that as year 4. They made $27.8 billion. Okay. So now, if we find our slope within this, we're going to take the 27.8 minus the 25.3 over 4 minus 3. So within that year, they made $2.5 billion. Okay. Grossed. Okay. They grossed $2.5 billion. Okay. So now, if I look at these, we don't have our y-intercept. Okay. So to find our y-intercept, we're going to pick a point and put it into point slope form. So y minus 25.3 equals my slope, which was that 2.5 times x minus 3. Okay. Distribute, we get 2.5x minus 7.5. And then we're going to add that 25.3 to the other side. And we get y equals 2.5x plus 17.8. So what that means is roughly in 2010, they only had $17.8 billion. Okay. Now, to predict the sales in 2017, okay, if 2013 we used as 3, 2014 we used at 4, 2017 we would use 7 for x. So to predict, I'm just going to plug in 7 for x and solve from there. So 2.5 times 7 plus 17.8 would give us our total cost in billions on how much they earned. Okay. If you have any questions, please let me know.